So I'm going to start off this episode with a few call-ins. For those of you who aren't on Anchor, the way to call into the show is to download the Anchor app, subscribe to my podcast, and then you can leave a message direct. Alternatively, if you don't have Anchor and you want to get in touch with me, go to my webpage at petejones.newcities.org with a link in the description, and you can find out the About Me page when you can get in contact with me via email, via multitude of social media. So if you've got something to say about any of these episodes, then do call in. I also want to say that my back catalogue is also being put up on YouTube as well as audio only, so that hopefully it'll get a slightly wider audience, because I know lots of the youngsters these days consume their podcasts via YouTube. So by putting it up there, hopefully I'll get a bit more coverage, and maybe we'll get some more call-ins or some more interaction with the show. So, on with the call-ins.
Hey Pete, Jason here. Josh Beckelheimer wasn't in the game with us, best left buried. It was his handle was Ethereal Dragon off of Audio Dungeon. I don't know what his real name is. So you may just want to put a disclaimer in the front. Good summation of best left buried. I would definitely give it another shot, but yeah, I'm not as enamored with it as I was when I played it the first time. And I agree with you. It's just a little too many a little too many fancy mechanics for me. As I get older, simpler is better. So, but I'm glad we played. I enjoyed playing with you guys, and I look forward to the next game we play together. So, take care.
Thanks for that, Jason. Yeah, it was Ethereal Dragon. Yeah, brain fart. I often get these things wrong. Yeah, I'm glad we played Best Left Buried. I think it definitely needs another edition, but whether we get one, I get the feeling from Zach that might not be top of his priorities, as he seems to be more interested in publishing other people's games at the moment. But we can but hope. I know Dave Aldridge has volunteered to edit any future editions he does, looking for consistencies, as he's found a few more. So, yeah, we'll wait and see what happens with Best Left Buried in future. Well, I'd certainly play it again, and maybe we can iron out some of the problems, but there we go. And now I have a couple of calls from Arfed about the Best Left Buried.
Arfed here, just calling in regarding your Best Left Buried podcast recently. As you said on your podcast, I used real dice. So the dice mechanic that you were talking about, it did seem a little bit unintuitive with the dice roller online, but with dice in person, I found it quite easy. Once I got my head around the mechanic, I quite enjoyed rolling 3 or 4 dice instead of just one dice, and it was easy to pick out the right ones or potentially re-roll one and put it to one side. So definitely easier in person to use dice, physical dice. I quite enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, Darren, I think you're spot on there. It's a lot easier rolling those dice in person than it is online. Unfortunately, when I play online, I always use online die rollers, because I don't sit at a desk or a table. I tend to sit in an armchair. So I would tend to use either the online dice roller, Discord, or maybe even use a dice roller on my phone as opposed to rolling physical dice. But if you can roll physical dice when you're playing online, then it's definitely a better option for Best Left Buried. Let's see what else he's got to say.
With regards to some of the other rules, we only had the sort of basic rules or a little cheat sheet I think you'd made up. So I didn't see all the classes and advancements and that. But it's some of the advancements and the classes, some of their skills and abilities was what was making it a little bit more confusing for me. Being fresh to the game, it seemed like it was meant to be a short set of rules, a quick game, but it seemed to get a little bit bogged down with trying to remember some of those abilities, advancements that only triggered in certain situations. So you needed to keep sort of constantly quick checking what your character could do and what his advancement was. But I think the dice system is worth another try, just to play through it again. Cheers.
Yeah, the sheets I sent out to all the players before the game was the Zini edition of Best Left Buried, and that is an alternative edition that's put out by the author so that you can print it out and hand it to your players, and it has the main rules on. So that's what all the other players had. Myself and Jason also had the full rules as well. And I agree, those abilities was what got confusing, and players kept forgetting that they had them. I think with repeated play, you'd probably find that a bit easier. So, oh yes, I agree with you. It's definitely worth a second shout, and maybe one of the other anchorates might clean it up so it makes it a little bit easier to play. Let's see who else we've got. I think we might have somebody else who's got a view on Best Left Buried.
I feel if you're going to do a podcast, you've got to be honest, Pete. Nobody likes to be negative. We like to be positive and give people a bit of a lift. But if you've got concerns over a game, and let's face it, you can't love everything, you've got to bring it to the fore. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your listener, and I think you did a good job on Best Left Buried. I listened to the interview that you were talking about, and the comments regarding playtesting set alarm bells ringing in my mind. Then I saw some sort of strange layout and issues with margins and the bindings on the hardback, and I've got to be honest, all this stuff shook my faith, and it seems to be played out in reality. Arlen Walker talks more about this game on Live from Pellen's Wasteland.
And that was Colin Greed from Spike Pit. Yeah, thanks for that, Colin. Yeah, as always, these are only my views, and just because I don't like a game doesn't mean someone else likes a game. But there's just too many little things in there that threw me off. I really wanted to like the game, and before the game I was gonna buy it, and it really put me off buying it, which is a shame, really, because I think it's got a lot of potential there. It just needs clearing up and sorting out and organising, and just a few of those errors gotten rid of. But the trouble is, we've got so many other games that'll just get put to the back now, and other things will take its place. But you never know. If a new edition does come out, I can guarantee that I will play it, and I'll give my reviews on it, and hopefully it's improved it. Now, that final call in from Colin Green is quite apt, because on one of his Spike Pit podcast episodes, I think it was episode 221, he said he'd just finishing watching the War of the Worlds adaptation done by the BBC. And I recently watched that, thoroughly enjoyed it. I know it came in for quite a bit of criticism in social media and other forums as being a bit dank and dreary and drawn out. But when you think about the War of the Worlds, the original H.G. Wells version, the book I'm talking about, there wasn't a lot of substance to it. The narrator was created to tell the listener the story, or the reader the story. There wasn't a lot of emotional attachment to the narrator, apart from when he saw his beloved Carrie leaving on the ship, on the ferry. He was there to relate the story to the reader. And probably up until recently, the best adaptation of the War of the Worlds, strange enough, has been the Jeff Wayne musical version on the double album. It was set in the correct time period and covered all the main tropes of the book. All the other versions released on media have been set in the contemporary day. So we had the 1930s version, which was released on radio in America, which caused a panic when they thought the invasion was real. There was the 1950s film version, again set in the contemporary period of the 1950s with the alien invasion. Again, that one was set in America. And then we had the Tom Cruise version, again set in modern day America, where the aliens had been buried underneath the ground. So I was quite pleased that the BBC had decided to do it closer to the original written time. It's set in the 1920s, just around the war, or just, I can't remember, it's just before the war, just after the First World War. So they had moved it on from the 1880s, 1890s, but it wasn't too far away. And there's going to be spoilers here. If you haven't watched it, you want to skip ahead now, because I'm going to put some spoilers in. Where the TV series did differ slightly was that they continued after the end of the invasion, once the aliens had died from the common cold or bacteria. And they had a few flash forwards during the early episodes, which was a bit confusing, but it tied it all together nicely. So the premise was that the alien invaders had been defeated. They'd been trying to terraform this planet. They'd all died out, but the planet was in a post-apocalyptic state. So the sun was covered, the red weed was still growing, plants were growing, people were dying. And we discussed it at my local face-to-face group last Thursday about what a cracking setting that would be for a post-apocalyptic game. Usually with post-apocalyptic games, it's set after the zombie apocalypse, modern day, or a bit further into the future, Mad Max style. So to have a Victorian-esque post-apocalyptic setting would be quite good, we thought. Yes, there's firearms, but there's nothing overpowered. Yeah, you've got horse-drawn carriages. Maybe you just go forward a little bit to just the early motor cars, who knows. But what a good setting that would be for a post-apocalyptic game. And it's something maybe that we'll sit down and think about, and maybe we might play a couple of one-shots on that. Colin suggested the same, so yeah, that was interesting, the War of the Worlds. So if any of you out there have got any ideas about how to run a post-apocalyptic game in the sort of the 1910s Victorian times, contact me with your thoughts, how you would run it. Talking of post-apocalyptic games, I was a big fan of the 2000 AD comic back in 1978 and subscribed from issue 1 when I was a mere 14 years old. Sadly, I threw all those magazines out. Still breaks my heart to this day. One of the comic strips in 2000 AD was Strontium Dogs. And Strontium Dogs was a bunch of mutants who were employed by humans to be bounty hunters, and they did all the dirty jobs that the humans wouldn't do. They went after criminals, arresting them, apprehending them, or killing them, but were still despised by the humans, even though they were doing all their dirty work. What a lot of people don't realise that Strontium Dogs started another magazine called Starlord, also in 1978, which lasted for 22 issues and 3 annuals. Well, I've managed to get my hands on a copy of the additional copy of all the Starlord material, and I'm working my way through these magazines, and I must say I'm having a blast. There's a few different strips in there. The first one is called Planet of the Damned, which is an airliner that is in the Bermuda Triangle, turns up through a wormhole and ends up on a alien planet where there's all these abnormal monsters trying to kill them. But there's also survivors from other periods of time that have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. Some sort of historical and some non-historical. So that was the first one. There's a second strip called Timequake, which was nuclear war starts back in the 1970s, and it has been caused by some alien species manipulating Earth and people, and some time-jumping future humans come back and get the person that has started the war by accident and bring him back in time to the dinosaur period to try and reverse the future, because they are from the future, an alternative future, before the aliens interfered. Now, with a lot of these articles back in the late 70s, there was a lot of sort of good British humour in them. Quite often the main characters, like Judge Dredd, were very serious, but there was a lot of humour and they were very well written. So we have Strontium Dogs, the start of Strontium Dogs, and then there's a Thunderbirds clone where you have a bunch of robots who are called the Robusters, and they're robots that are working for like a international rescue type operation, and they go and rescue people and go to disasters, but instead of being marionettes, they're robots, and that one is quite hilarious. So the Starlord magazine is a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying reading it. I've also managed to get my hands on some additional back copies of the Planet of the Ape magazines, and we're still waiting for the first copies of 2000 AD, which I threw away, but some kind soul has digitized for me, so I look forward to reading all those again. So that's it for another episode. If you want to contact me, please contact me through my website, and the details are in the show notes, and I'll see you all on the flip side. You have been listening to the Dragons Are Real podcast. My name is Pete Jones. You can find more information at my website at petejones.neocities.org or at my blog at dragonsarealpodcast.tumblr.com. The opening music was Fireflies and Stardust by Kevin MacLeod. The closing music, also by Kevin MacLeod, was Fretless